Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. And I can't believe I'm saying this. I am joined once again by Ben Jacobs. Ben, you've given me so much time. Thank you so much. It really means a lot. And we're going to be going through a Chelsea transfer special, one of my favorite episodes to do, especially having you on. So thank you so much for joining, and let's get right into it. Chelsea have just had a couple of crazy signings already, but do you see them making any more signings in this January transfer window?
I think so, because the signings that have come in don't all tick the positions where there's urgency. And whereas Chelsea do have to balance the January window with any summer targets, they will also want to make a midfield reinforcement. A right back also isn't out of the question either. And then we wait and see what else they've got cooking, which I know is a phrase that Chelsea fans like to hear. So midfield will be the priority between now and the close of the January transfer window. But we know, for example, that they're still exploring the possibility of Marcus Thuram as well. And that's a different situation because Chelsea are hoping to maybe agree a fee in January and then get player buy-in. And unless anything changes, other than that, the player would wait until the summer and be available on a free transfer. And then that's when you've got a massive race and a variety of clubs. So there's an element of urgency, assuming no contract is signed, because Chelsea want to try and move and fend off suitors. But naturally, the priority is more midfield because Joao Felix has come in, and even though he's suspended now until February, there's that ability for him to be very versatile and score goals. And I think every Chelsea fan watching his debut still saw, despite the sending off, how lively he was and how much technical quality he brings. So therefore, that solves potentially the ability for Chelsea to find goals, but also he can be used in a variety of different tactical ways. And then if you add Mykhailo Mudryk into the mix as well, he's a left winger, but can also play centrally. And then virtually everybody else currently at Chelsea in that type of position is exactly the same, whether it's a Christian Pulisic when he's fit, a Hakim Ziyech, a Mason Mount, and so on. All of these types of players can complement Kai Havertz. One or two of them can play instead of Kai Havertz, and you've still obviously got Aubameyang at the club and Raheem Sterling too. So when some of these players are fit, or when all of these players are in the mix, Graham Potter's got plenty of options. And perhaps no individual name leaps out at the moment as being the one that's going to get 6-7 goals between now and the end of the season, but all of them look capable of chipping in with 2 or 3, which alleviates the burden. And hopefully one of them sort of steps up and becomes the lead source of goals. And that might be Kai Havertz, it might be Joao Felix. We wait and see. Aubameyang and Sterling, I still think, could have roles to play between now and the end of the season. So then you start to say, where do Chelsea move? And obviously midfield becomes the priority because there's a need for a revamp. And it is just that balance between who's available now at market value versus those in the summer. So we know about Chelsea's interest in Declan Rice, and Arsenal may well rival Chelsea in that race, and Manchester United too. That's pretty open at the moment. Chelsea are there, but nothing guaranteed. And the only thing helping Chelsea and Arsenal is just the fact that Rice would quite like to stay in London if at all possible. It won't be a deal breaker, but as I understand it, that's a consideration. Champions League also, so Arsenal have the advantage there. But Chelsea have seen Declan Rice as a priority for quite some time. We wait and see how that develops. Jude Bellingham in the summer as well, but Chelsea are by no means front runners. Liverpool, Real Madrid, Manchester City, all ahead of them at this stage in the race. And even though some would say Chelsea would pay big, so they would have a club-to-club advantage in terms of their rivals, because of all this money being spent, they can't keep spending big. And that is not only under financial fair play, it's also down to business needs. So with financial fair play, you can offset the outlay against the contract length, but not every player will agree to a 7, 8, 9-year contract. But it's a bit easier under financial fair play in the short term because of the ability on the books to classify the outlay differently to in reality. Mm-hmm. But you still have business needs as a club, and Chelsea will be thinking about any lump sum payments, any transfers that don't have preferable structures in terms of payment terms. They'll also be looking at the business needs around building the multi-club model. They'll be looking in the long term around the money needed for stadium redevelopment. So it's not an endless pot of money. And therefore, if you bring in hypothetically Enzo Fernandez plus Mikhailo Mudryk, then you probably have to pick between either Declan Rice or Jude Bellingham. But it's not as simple as that, because you might pick a target and you might lose out on that target, which is why clubs have to spin multiple plates. So we're always going to see this drive, whether legitimately or in terms of rumour, towards way more names. And Chelsea are going to have to escalate the names that they might want, because they don't know they're going to win every race right now. I think it's an even race for Declan Rice. I think they're behind for Jude Bellingham, but they might still try both, because who knows how things are going to pan out. And this is what perhaps fans don't realise, that you turn your attention to a target. If you miss out on them, you've got a backup, but you can't tell that target they're a backup. Imagine if Chelsea say, right, we're going to get Declan Rice, so Jude Bellingham is only a backup. Even though they're not technically like for like, they can kind of play in the same position, but Bellingham is more versatile and can play further forwards. But if Bellingham ever got wind of the fact that Chelsea wanted Rice 1, Bellingham 2, then obviously they would never win that Bellingham race. So it's kind of about authentically and consistently communicating with players to express an interest without letting anybody know exactly how you're going to move in the market. And that's what Liverpool do exceptionally. And that's what Chelsea have done bad in the past. So we have to wait and see. But specifically in January, in midfield, Moises Caicedo is a big one to watch. I think that the relationship with Brighton could be quite helpful. And we know that Brighton would understand the player situation if Caicedo wanted the move, but it's about agreeing a price. And this is where the tactic of Chelsea with Mudryk and with Cucurella can backfire, because Brighton can say 62 million for Cucurella, it's at least 75 million for Moises Caicedo. Not because there's a like-for-like comparison, because they're different players in different positions, but still, if Cucurella was 62 million as a potential maximum fee, Caicedo is going to be at least 70 to 75, if not 80 million. And that might be quite difficult. And the other thing with Caicedo is his new agents are not even in yet. So that's one to watch towards the end of the window. But even if Chelsea are not successful in anything come the summer, it wouldn't remotely surprise me if they return to the table for Moises Caicedo. The interest there is very concrete. Edson Alvarez, another player that Todd Boehly, when he was still interim sporting director, had kept tabs on. But Ajax don't really want to sell mid-season. And that, again, is an outlay of 50 million euros. So Chelsea may decide to turn to other targets. But those are two to watch in the midfield area. And it wouldn't remotely surprise me if Chelsea look at budget options as well, which is obviously why, away from the midfield, Thuram has come into the conversation, because there's not a massive outlay there to actually agree a deal. But it just depends whether the player wants to move mid-season. And there'll be other targets that surprise us, no doubt, like that are simpler to get done and of budget variety, because Chelsea can't keep doing every deal at 50, 60, 70 million. Otherwise, the January window is going to outspend the summer window, and then they're going to enter into next summer and maybe want to do some serious business. But 3 back-to-back windows that have a spend in excess of, let's just call it 200 or 220 million, are not sustainable. And even if under financial fair play, they're declarable, from a business point of view, it's not the direction of travel that Chelsea want to be heading into.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point as well that, I think people need to realize that even if we don't get something done now, like, it's very difficult to get a transfer done in January, because clubs don't want to see their players leave mid-season, essentially. And so maybe if we don't see, it's not that they're not prioritizing a midfielder, maybe one just isn't available at the moment, and we're definitely going to prioritize one in the summer, for example. What about any right back options? Because I think, we've recently seen Trevor Chalobah just play at right back and fill in since Reece James is out injured. Aspie has played there, but hasn't been quite fit enough. So do you think that they're exploring maybe a budget option there, or just kind of content with Trevor and, maybe in the summer go for somebody?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it, with the right back, because what Chelsea need now versus a player's long-term vision and opportunity kind of conflict, in the sense that, of course, Chelsea would like a right back now, and they'd love to find someone of high quality that they could throw in that then would be happy once Reece James is back. as playing second fiddle, but players don't look at it that way. And a right back is quite a hard sell, because if you find the right name, you have to be able to persuade them what their role is at the football club. And when Reece James is fit, you're not playing at right back. It's as simple as that. So it wouldn't surprise me if Chelsea look at a player that is a little bit more versatile, that can be right back, centre back, or right back, right midfield, because then perhaps the player feels like they've got different opportunities to get into the starting lineup. Or you go down the opposite extreme and you bring somebody young and for the future, but then that doesn't solve the short-term problem. Of course, the third aspect is you could go for somebody who's a lot older and is a completely short-term stopgap. But what kind of players are on the market that tick that box? So when people look at either a right back or a full back, and they mention names, for example, like Kyle Walker-Peters, he's not going to want to come to Chelsea and play a few games and then find that he's waiting for Reece James. But Kyle Walker-Peters at least is a little bit more versatile and maybe is comfortable playing in a variety of different positions. Pedro Porro is one to watch loosely, I suppose, from Chelsea's perspective. I only say loosely because Tottenham want the player and are the ones that have held the meetings. And they've got new meetings scheduled for this week as well via intermediaries to try and understand whether or not there's a deal to be done beyond just the release clause. And the sporting stance at the moment is you pay the release clause, a bit like with Enzo Fernandez, or nothing is happening. But again, it's a player that Chelsea admire and are monitoring. And are they going to do what they did with Mudryk and suddenly come in and meet the valuation? We have to wait and see. So a hijack can't be ruled out, but Tottenham are the ones pushing and Chelsea aren't at this point, but there's still 2 weeks left in the window. So I think that it's that type of player who maybe could be given some game time now and add a bit of depth, but also be developed into a variety of different areas in the future. Because if you are looking only at an out-and-out right back, then the player in that position may turn around and go, I'm not really sure. So that obviously is the case with somebody like Denzel Dumfries that might still be a summer target for Chelsea. And again, you've got to persuade him what his role is in the team. With Josip Juranovic, highly in demand, a player that Chelsea definitely looked at during the World Cup. But once again, is he going to want to leave and then find as soon as Reece James is fit, there's kind of no role and strategy and pathway. And that word pathway is going to be key as to how the ownership group, the recruitment team and the manager sell this. And then the final name that people are kind of talking about at the moment, very loosely, I suppose, in terms of Chelsea's perspective, is a player like Matty Cash, who would be perfect again in the short term, but is 25 years of age and is playing regularly for Aston Villa and his country as well, Poland, and has been through all this in his past before as well, where he joined Nottingham Forest and the first season that he was there in 2015, 2016, wasn't getting any game time. And as a consequence, went out on loan to Dagenham and Redbridge, played some games in 2016, came back, played in the Championship, and thereafter ended up moving to Aston Villa and getting immediate Premier League game time. And then his second season in Aston Villa, he really added the offensive qualities to his game, which he did in fairness at Nottingham Forest as well in 18-19, I remember, in the Championship. But he became much more of a threat to Villa in 2021-2022. He scored 4 goals. This season, it's been a bit more hit and miss so far. He hasn't scored yet this season, but he's still very much liked and admired by a number of clubs. But the last thing he's going to want to do is play out of position or join Chelsea and get game time now and then just be part of a squad. Because every single player has seen what Chelsea have done in the past. I mean, I'm only going to use one example, and it's not a right-back example, but look at Danny Drinkwater. Excellent for Leicester. Won the Premier League with Leicester. Barely got a look in. But he wasn't the first player. I think back to Steve Sidwell, who was excellent for Reading in the Premier League, moved to Chelsea, barely got any game time. Perhaps not to the same degree as Drinkwater, but there's a pattern there. So players are wary still, even if Chelsea are promising pathways and promising development. They're maybe a bit more wary now about, well, prove it. What's my game plan? How often am I going to play? And a player like Matty Cash, because he's not 30, 31, 32, will again fall into that category. So I sense with Chelsea, it's a bit like, how do you solve a problem like a backup right back? And it's tough because Reece James is always starting there. So do you go older? Do you go loan? Do you go young and for the future and hope one day they genuinely challenge Reece James? Or do you go versatile? And for me, older or versatile seem more logical because older doesn't care as much if they play as often. They just want to be part of like a big club and, not come in with an ego. And obviously, if Chelsea go down the line of versatile, maybe it's right back, centre back, or maybe it's right back, right midfield. And then they have the belief that they can play alongside Reece James rather than competing for him in that right back position. So these are probably some of the things that they're thinking through, but I certainly don't think solving the short-term right back problem and getting long-term gain out of whoever you bring in is an easy thing to do in January, which is why maybe we'll see more of a movement in the summer.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it really does seem like quite a complex issue to solve. And I know you have to go, so I'll just ask one question. Please feel free to keep it as short as you want. Will Chelsea see any outgoings in this window? Feel free to just keep it a yes or no, because I know you have to go.
Well, I mean, we know that outgoings will happen either in January or in the summer. They have to. And the likes of Christian Pulisic and Hakim Ziyech are definitely out there on the market. Pulisic won't go in January, and part of that is because of the injury. Ziyech is a very real possibility as an outgoing, which would be a shame, I think, because he's done okay for Chelsea since coming back from the World Cup, and he had a decent World Cup. But Chelsea would also like to get him off the wage bill too. And they've obviously had incomings in the Ziyech-like position. There's so many versatile players, but a few of them can obviously play where Ziyech plays. And Christopher Nkunku's coming in too, another versatile player. So Chelsea would like to get rid of Hakim Ziyech, but wages are the problem. So Newcastle have been keen in the past, but it's wages. And Newcastle don't desperately want to break their wage structure. So a lot may depend on how, I suppose, desperately Ziyech wants to move now if he's to go in January, and if he's prepared to take a wage cut. And if he is, there'll be suitors out there that will take him, including Newcastle. Jorginho is another one. Newcastle, Juventus, two clubs that have also looked at him. Far less likely to sign a new deal now than N'Golo Kante. And then in the summer, I think there'll still be a serious conversation about Koulibaly, which might sound strange to some because he's obviously only joined the club over the summer. I'm not saying he'll go over next summer, but there'll be a conversation about his future, in my opinion, to be had. And even more so with Badiashile arriving, and if Levi Colwell is back, and if Fofana is fit, and Silva will still be in the side next season. So, or at least one would presume, despite his age. So, therefore, there's a lot of centre-backs, and Koulibaly may struggle for game time, and his performances haven't always been up to scratch either. He has been a bit error-prone. So we have to wait and see on that one. But there will be a clear-out, and it won't just be down to individuals. It will be down to who's on what wages and how Chelsea can reduce the overall wage bill. And who wants to stay if they don't get the terms that they're looking for or the length of contract that they're looking for. And still, we don't know the situations of Kepa and Mendy, if both are fit. Does Mendy come back in? Does Kepa stay in? He made some phenomenal saves, Kepa, against Villa and against Crystal Palace more recently, last time out as well. And there's been times where it's looked like Kepa would have interest. Napoli over the summer, for example. So with Slonina joining, what will be the situation? How happy, once Potter decides who his number one is, if they're both fit, is the number two happy? Because they're both like up there. They're both competing. You can make arguments for both. So whichever one, if everyone's fit, that doesn't become that number one come the summer, are they going to look for a move away as well? So I expect 3 or 4 outgoings, but it's not easy in January to facilitate them, because the Ziyech price has gone up because of the World Cup and the wages are high. Pulisic's injured, so that takes a move off the table. And Potter's already said that. So if he's true to his word, Pulisic won't go anywhere either. Aubameyang is wanted by Barcelona and isn't especially happy since Thomas Tuchel's left. But They only want him back on a free transfer. There's no business value to Chelsea to do that. And there's only 2 weeks left in the window. Koulibaly won't go in January. Kepa obviously is going nowhere in the short term. So there's a few names that may go in the summer, but it's only really Ziyech at the moment, I think, that an offer may come in for. And then it will depend on the fee and the wages. And then Conor Gallagher's an interesting one, because a lot of Chelsea fans might be quite sad to see him go in January, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone tries their luck if Chelsea make a midfield incoming. But again, we can't rule that out in the summer either. And Crystal Palace continue to monitor the player, even though they were quite fiery towards him in that 1-0 loss. And the Palace fans were booing Gallagher, but they'd take him back in a heartbeat if they possibly could make the finances work. So there's a few Chelsea players for sure. And then we need to determine with David Datro Fofana, with Andre Santos, and Levi Colwell again, whether they'll be loaned out again, or whether Chelsea are going to try and integrate them. This is next season, obviously, and the decisions they make there will determine how they choose to play in the summer. But I think the early part of the summer window, and who knows, the last few days of January, but certainly the early part of the summer, might be quite Outgoings focused. Because if Chelsea get a lot of business done in January and they had a busy summer, they'll then need a clear out to kind of keep the squad size a decent size and to reduce the wage bill and to make more space. And this is how the market oscillates over 3 windows, that if you spend and buy and spend and buy, then by the 3rd window, regardless if it's January, summer, or if it's summer, January, summer, and it's the latter in Chelsea's case, you have to start thinking about that balance. And if you buy big and then buy big and buy young and integrate them in, then you need a pathway plan, or they come into your squad and some of your older players have to go. You can't really go 3 windows without having a clear out if you've bought to the volume that Chelsea have bought at so far. So that's important to stress as well.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be interesting really to see kind of which players end up staying and going. I won't say too much more because I know you have to go and you've given me way too much time and I really appreciate it. So Ben, please go. Everybody follow Ben. If you want to say where they can follow you, feel free to do so. I'll definitely put in the description.
Yeah, at Jacobs Ben on Twitter and at Ben David Jacobs on a brand new TikTok. And always a pleasure coming on.
Ooh. I saw you on my TikTok, actually. Well, thank you so much, Ben. I'll let you go. Everybody, follow Ben. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your days. Until next time, I'm out. Bye.